Hey everybody, Eric Dorward here with Spartan Rocketry Club, and today we are continuing our build of the Estes Vesta Intruder, which is our sci-fi alien ship-looking thing. And we are going to start on the fins. Now, I've actually done a decent amount of work on the fins already, as evidenced by all the white dust all over my workspace here. The fins, this is kind of an odd one. So, according to our instructions here, typically we sand the fins and then we cut them out and we then finish them later. Well, this time it says that we should spray both sides of balsa sheets with primer, let dry, then cut them out. And the reason is that we are going to be affixing, you know, some decorations essentially to our fins. So we've got these cardstock bits that I've cut out. And the idea is that there's some spots that the balsa is going to show through. So we need to do at least a little bit of prep work on them, because once we put these bits of cardstock on, we're not sanding in there. We're not going to be able to finish that. So this is as finished as things are going to get. This proved to be, I don't know, I don't think I would have done this again, given what I know now, because it was thoroughly unpleasant. The main problem is that, so here's the last one that needs to be cut out. I have sanded this a lot, like repeatedly. This is, I did at least some initial cutting on this side. This side, though, is closer to what it looked like when I began. And as you can see, or maybe you can't, I can't see where the laser cut fin lines are very well, which is to say, like, the entire purpose of sealing, putting the wood fill and sealing and all that stuff onto the balsa is to eliminate grooves, the grain of the wood specifically. Well, the byproduct is that it also kind of clogged up where the laser cuts are. So essentially what I ended up doing was I was cutting things out old school style. I had a very hard time figuring out where I'm supposed to cut, so I was going very slowly, and I still didn't follow the line exactly on most of these. So my fins don't look like they should, unfortunately. So this is the last one. I'm going to finish cutting this one out just to illustrate the whole thing. Now, typically, when we're cutting out laser cut fins, we can see where the little connective parts still are, and we just cut them out. Well, that is not an option today, unfortunately. So I had to very slowly and carefully trace with my hobby knife where the cracks that I could see were and cut the whole way around. And I did not the world's greatest job, frankly. It's okay. But one of the benefits to laser cutting is that all the fins really ought to be exactly the same size. And as a result of me having to kind of trace where I thought the lines were, I didn't get fins that were exactly the same size. This one's not bad. I mean, you can see the little burrs. So I did a pretty decent job of cutting this one out. This is, in fact, not to toot my own horn, but this is probably the best one. But I can see, like right here, I missed cut a little bit. I cut a little too far in my first time through it, and it didn't go very well. So it's not beautiful, unfortunately, but they're all cut out now. So they're all cut out. What do we do with them? Well, there are a total of 12 of these bits of cardstock. This is very, very thin cardstock. It's way thinner than the cardstock that we use for motor mounts. And this is purely decorative. It's going to add some texture, flavor, whatever you want to say, to the fins themselves. Give it the aesthetic we're looking for here. There are times when you would use techniques similar to this for reasons other than pure aesthetics. There's a technique called papering, where you just literally get like a sheet of computer paper and you crazy glue it onto a piece of balsa that you're going to use as a fin. And the purpose to that is twofold. One, it covers up whatever irregularities you happen to have in the balsa. So that's nice. So you don't have to spend as much time finishing, doing the finishing work. So these are sticky. There we go. And it also actually makes the balsa significantly stronger. You wouldn't think that a sheet of paper would, but it actually does. So, yeah, the idea there is very, very thin viscosity, crazy glue, and then you just stick it on, cut it as necessary to make it match the size. But again, that's not what we're doing here. Anyway, so what are we doing here? Well, we are going to add some glue. And the question is, well, the instructions say add glue basically to the entire fin here. Well, if we do that, then we're going to get glue that we'd have to clean out of this notch that we have spent all this time and effort and made the fin kind of ugly to try to keep this as smooth as possible. And if I fill that with glue, it's not going to be smooth and pretty. It's going to be kind of messy. So I think what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to glue the paper and then stick the paper on. These fins, or the papers that go on the fins, they're all identical. So it doesn't really matter which way it goes, but I do need two of them, one for each side. And I'm going to put a little bit of glue on here, and then I'm going to brush it about as thin as I can get it. Just get myself glue to work with. This is going to be kind of a exercise in reducing the amount of glue rather than increasing it. So what I have here is a piece of balsa scrap that is wider than my usual dowel or scrap that I use for getting the glue spread out. And I'm just going to kind of use this like a brush it as thoroughly, spread it out as evenly as possible, making sure that I definitely get the edges. That glue out of there. Just keep bumping into it. Anyway, I spread this out as thin as I can. I actually do need a little bit more. Better to have to add a little bit later than take a whole bunch off, because that would just be messy. Alright, so spread this out. And yeah, I'm getting a little bit on my mat. I will clean that up in a bit. Alright, I'm going to try my best not to get any glue on my fingers. Just seems like a good plan, but especially because I don't want to get any nasty glue smudges on the outside of this if I can help it. And unfortunately, some of it, despite my best efforts, there already are a few. Remember, this is the finished surface, essentially, so we want it to be as nice as possible. Okay. So I'm just going to try to center this as best as I can, push it flat, and I actually don't have much glue at all on my fingers, so that's actually pretty good. So there are a couple spots where I can see some glue smudges, but overall this is pretty good. Alright, that's one side. Repeat the process on the other. Remember, these are all identical. It's just, yeah, it fits like that, but it also fits like that. There isn't a preferred side. So I just need to remember, since this is the side with glue, it's going to be flipped over when I attach it. So repeat the process. Okay. And again, I'm going to spread the glue as thinly as possible, because I really don't want the excess glue like seeping out through the sides. Plus, the more glue you have, the longer it's going to take to dry, and we really don't need to add time to this. It'd be nice to get it done as quickly as possible. All right. In retrospect, I see now how I managed to get a little bit of glue smudge on. So I'm going to slip my hobby knife under here, try to pick it up that way without touching the paper with my hands. Now that is a bit of glue that I want to get rid of. So I'm going to be careful not to put my fin back into that. And go. Again, the paper is actually bigger, or sorry, it's actually smaller than the fin, which is a good thing. It would be weird if it were the other way around. But that just means I have to kind of do a little bit of work in centering it as best as possible, as best as I can. There is a little bit of glue nastiness there, but not much. That's pretty good. All right. So the instructions say that half of my fins are going to just be the paper on top. The other half are going to have some extra little accoutrements on them. And that is these little things here. So it's going to look like this. Now, typically, when I do a construction of a fin, I put wax paper down, and I'm going to do that. But I also then use my ruler, a nice big metal ruler, to make sure these things are all lined up. Well, my metal ruler is actually not thick enough to accomplish that job. It's fine for, if we were to be gluing these things together, like if I were gluing them like this, it'd be great, but it's not actually going to help here. So instead, I need to find something a little bit thicker, which, here's a box. That'll probably work. Basically, I just want a flat surface. So long as it is a flat surface, that ought to accomplish the goals that I have. Oh, here's my wax paper. All right, so down goes my wax paper. Now, unfortunately, there isn't really a great guide for where the glue is supposed to go. I could put the glue on this thing, but not entirely sure where, or I could put the glue on this, and again, not entirely sure where. I think I'm going to put it on the main fin and just kind of hope I have it nice and distributed. Again, I'm going to brush it thin, as thinly as I can, with my kind of scrap paintbrush. I don't want excess, and I would prefer, actually in this case, to have too little rather than too much. And I am going to have some glue in the wrong places, unfortunately, because it's a weird shape, and it's kind of hard to see exactly where it ought to go. So I'm going to try my best to clean up the obvious extraneous bits of glue while trying to keep the fin basically intact, or where it ought to be. Not intact, it is intact. Lined up with where it ought to be. That's reasonably good. Now I'm going to bring in my box here and make sure that I have it lined up nicely. And that looks pretty good. I'm not going to leave the box in place because it'll definitely get glued to the fin, and I certainly don't want that. All right, so that needs to set a little bit, and then I will glue the other piece to the back side of it. In the meantime, another thing we need to do is we need to work on the nose cone. The nose cone is right here. The nose cone is particularly big, and it actually has, it has this ridge line here, which kind of feels like a wing to some degree. And because the fins are not particularly large, the nose cone is, and it acts somewhat as a lifting body, we need to put a little bit of weight into the nose cone. We accomplish that with clay. I've actually put the clay in already, but the problem here is that this is a big piece of plastic, and I need to tamp it down. So I'm going to grab the longest, sturdiest bit of balsa scrap that I have here and hope that it'll go the whole way in. I can actually see where it is. I can see the shadow that it casts, and it just barely reaches. And I'm kind of concerned that I'm going to end up snapping this piece of balsa because it's not super strong and it's a long way in there. So I'm just going to try to push it as best as I can in the general direction of the nose. You'd think that this would be not particularly challenging, but given the length that I need to be pushing, it's surprisingly difficult. All right, that's okay, but not great. What I'm going to eventually do is, anytime I have a problem like this, I do have a pretty long piece of metal that fits in the hole that will do the job. It's the launch rod. So at some point, I'm going to get the launch rod, and I'm just going to kind of tamp it, the clay in using the launch rod. Just taking a peek in there, I mean, the clay is basically in the nose cone, but it's it still looks like the snakes that I that I made in order to get the clay in there. So it's okay, but it needs a little bit of work. All right, finishing up the fin construction then, I'm going to flip this over and I'm going to repeat the process. I'm going to try to learn from my mistakes here and get the glue more or less in the right shape this time. I don't really need much at all at the bottom. Oops, that's not how the piece of this extra little bit of fin looks. So try to spread it out this way a bit more, a little bit less over there. All right, that ought to do. Line it up and hold it in place. Again, I'm going to try to clean up as much of the excess glue from the seams as I can right now. That actually went on pretty well. I'm going to again use my box here to make sure that everything is nicely aligned, because I very much want the two extra pieces that are sticking off to the side to be lined up as well as possible. Actually, try my sanding block here. It's a little longer, but it also has sandpaper attached to it. Yeah, there we go. That's better. All right, that actually looks pretty nice. I am reasonably pleased with that. I need to make 2 more of those, and then I need to paper the remaining fins. That's going to take a while, and it's certainly not good watching. So I think at this point, this is a good place to stop. In the next video, I guess it's time to start attaching the fins. So something to look forward to. See you then.